School is in. But are you really ready to learn? Open your eyes to a new day in education with The Awakening Educator, a program specifically designed to explore a new, mindful way of educating our youth. Learn about social emotional learning, new modalities of teaching, and the most relevant topics in education with your hosts, Susan Andrian and Megan Sweet. Susan and Megan will take you inside the issues by looking at them from different points of view, from policies and research to teaching models that are actually used in schools. There's never a dull moment in this classroom. Have any questions you'd like to ask? Maybe you have knowledge you'd like to share, and share your thoughts live on air. Grab a pen and paper and get ready to open your textbooks and minds to a new way of learning on The Awakening Educator.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Awakening Educator. I'm Susan Andrian, and always I'm here with my best buddy,
Megan Sweet.
Yes, we are super excited today to have a conversation with Tricia Roos, and we're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience. Welcome, Tricia.
Hey, thanks for having me. Well, I have to say, hey, y'all, because I'm from Texas, and that's like our staple thing to say. And I think I say the word y'all at least like 40,000 times a day. It just seems like it fits. But I'm in Dallas. I've been in education for over 20 years. And it was kind of an interesting fit because I knew in high school that I wanted to be a coach. I had this really deep desire. I played like 6 different sports, and I was this super weird kid that I would after practice, I would meet with the coach and be like, how did you plan those drills? And like, how do you run a practice? And after a game, if we would lose, I would want to stay and talk about like how we could do better. And so I knew that that was some kind of calling to me somehow. But then I got into college and I got into the business school, and I was also really in love with marketing and admission and like that world too, like branding. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know if I would be good as a teacher in the classroom, but I knew I could be a really good coach on the court. My main love was volleyball. And so I ended up in private education because in that realm, I could use my business degree in marketing. And I served as a director of marketing, but also as an admissions director. So kind of like recruitment of students. But then I landed as the head volleyball coach at the largest co-ed Catholic school here in Texas. And so the educational lens I have is real different because I feel like it's mostly teaching kids how to play a sport, but I always saw it as so much more than that. I got to build these bonds with kids on a really personal level, a really emotional level. I knew everything that was going on with them in their lives and their relationship with their parents and their boyfriends and their friends. And I think half of my time was probably spent with them in my office, like in a therapy session. Mm-hmm. But I ended up writing a book, and it was published this last semester in the fall, called When Wishes Change. And so I've actually transitioned into public speaking. I'm writing another book, and I do consulting. And then now I'm the director of coaching at a club here in town. So I'm still teaching volleyball that way. So my educational journey was more on the coaching side. But then once I wrote my book and got into that public speaking world, I just made a huge shift over COVID, and that's what I'm doing now.
Oh, welcome. That's exciting. Mm-hmm. That's I mean, I think coaching is really important and absolutely a legitimate and necessary part of our education system for a lot of our kids. I'm actually being a principal right now at a school, and for a lot of our kids, sports is the motivator that gets them to school and gets them coming, and the connections they have with their coaches are absolutely really special and needed. Because sometimes you can't connect with your teacher that way, or if you're a physical kid. My son's best friend is just a really physical kid and has been since he was born. Like he was literally running at 8 months old. Like he is physical, but his academic stuff, it's not as strong. And so for him, I think having people that he knows and that care about him, they can see how great he is in athletics, help him to feel more confidence and the academic side. So I think it's super important. I'm really excited that you're here.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. I'm really interested as well. I feel like sports, and I teach at a graduate school level. And a lot of times when I talk about with my students, what were some of the things that got you to this point, many of them talk about sports.
Yeah.
And I almost always bring up Dr. Bruce Perry because that's who I've been working with, but he recently added a branch to this neurodevelopmental model. I trained in the neurosequential model for education and therapeutics, but he's just added a whole branch called the neurosequential model for sports, and really looking at the therapeutic value and the healing value of being involved in sports. And the relational piece that you mentioned is really important. And I definitely want to hear about that piece, and also think about some of the ways that sports, I think about sports as this both healing savior area, and then also sometimes the pressure that comes along with being involved in sports, and sort of that line of where it shifts from therapeutic to becoming the pressure, and sort of thinking about how do we create a lifelong love of sports and the value of sports while protecting our young people from maybe some of the more challenging parts.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and to that extent, I think what's happened over the last 20 years is, when I was in high school, I went to a small school. So you'd pick up a ball and you'd play that sport, and then you'd put it down, and then you just move on to the next sport.
Yeah.
And there was always something to be said about like looking forward to that sport again, because you wouldn't see it again for another year. And then you would move on to the next one and the next one. And I think that, back in the day when that was more normal, it was always kind of more fun. Like I was always a really competitive athlete, but I kind of saw it as this is not my entire life. I have a lot of other sports and activities and things that I do. And so that's not like all that I have. Now I think that so many kids, they're picking these select sports so young, and then that's their identity. It becomes who they are. And like, I am a volleyball player, and if I'm not good at volleyball, then I'm not a good person, and then no one's going to like me. And so I started seeing that shift in my athletes, because again, when I started my career, there was more girls that were playing multiple sports, and they were involved in maybe different kinds of activities. And then as the pressure grew, I don't know where it really was coming from. I don't know if it was the clubs or the colleges or whoever, for these kids to be playing year round. It became who they were. And I really had to, I don't have a degree at all in psychology, but I think I've earned at least 10 badges for it, because I had to really like get to the root of like, no, that's not who you are. And so when you have this like injury, especially those kids that get hurt and it ends their career, they're devastated. That's when I saw more girls, especially that had the eating disorders, that were suicidal, that were depressed, that were anxious or had anxiety, because they no longer were who they thought they were in their identity. And so that's why I think coaching to me was so important, because I saw it much more than just coaching a sport that I love. I want the girls that I coach to know that their identity is not in them as an athlete. If you have a bad day on the court, like that's okay. All I'm asking for you to do is try your best and fight your hardest. And if today that fight was a little bit less than what it was yesterday, it's more about like how you rebound and how you respond. And just don't give up. I think so many kids nowadays, when it's too hard, they're like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. That's too hard. And then they give up. But sports teaches you like, today was a really hard practice and we had to run a lot. But tomorrow I'm going to commit to like being the best version of myself all over again. And so I love that part of it. And I love taking that approach, because I don't want my athletes to quit, and I don't want them to like have a bad taste in their mouth about it. And I don't want them to feel like all they are in life is a volleyball player, because let's be real, like only 1% or less of kids can even play in college. And then especially in women's sports, it's really hard to play professional and make any money or make a living out of it. And so that's not realistic to put everything you have into your identity as an athlete.
I think you make a really good point, Tricia, about the change in sports lately. And I thought that maybe it was just that I didn't get it. I wasn't really an athlete in school. I mean, I played soccer, but on the JV team and way back on the bench on that JV team. So I definitely wasn't in any competitive sports, but I did feel like when we were kids coming up, there was more of an opportunity to have a well-rounded experience of the world of different sports and of just being a kid. And you're absolutely right. Nowadays, kids that play sports, it's all encompassing. And it takes up every weekend, all evenings.
And the families too, like my friends who have kids who their whole lives are committed to the club sports.
Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful my son isn't athletic just for that reason, because it is this all encompassing, and it does start to affect friendships and kids' sense of self. And you're right. It's still that same percentage of kids that do or don't make it into the pros, which is virtually none of them. But it's easy for so much of their identity and just their childhood can get wrapped up in something that can be pretty ethereal, and also actually can give them lots of physical damage, because I think we actually push our kids' bodies too hard these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for that perspective. And so, I think sports are great. And these days it's a bit intense. So what made you made a transition over COVID? Can you talk to us a little bit about what that transition was? You were coaching and you were doing recruitment for a school and marketing for a school, and then you made a shift. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things going on at the same time. So in short, so I have a son that's about to be 11 next week and a daughter that's about to be 6. Their birthdays are 2 days apart. And in between them, we had a child that in utero, we were told to abort because she had disabilities. And it was really like a shock to us. It was sad. We were expecting another child. We were super excited. And we didn't find this diagnosis out until I was about 12 or 13 weeks along. And so I was only a week away from starting my volleyball season that year. And which is such an exciting time, and everybody's all optimistic and excited. And here I am carrying this really heavy news that I was just told that I will likely never make it full term to this pregnancy, and that she'll likely die, a stillbirth. And so we decided to continue the pregnancy. And to me, I think a lot of my sports background too, I was like, I just want to fight. I just want to see what happens. I want to do the best that I can and just be okay with that. And in that volleyball season, I watched high school girls be completely selfless. Like, they knew what I was going through was way worse than their like drama with their boyfriend or their friend or whatever. And they just kind of vowed, like, we're going to make volleyball fun. We're not going to complain. We're going to make this a great experience for you so that it makes your life easier. And I was so appreciative of that, because it really was my escape. And my team went on to win the state championship that year in her honor. And then I did make it full term, and there was like literally a 0% chance I was told that was even possible, because she had a 2-chamber heart and she couldn't really swallow amniotic fluid. So when she was born, it was kind of like this big spectacle of an event at the hospital here in town, because it just wasn't supposed to happen. And they prepared me that when she came out, to expect her to live less than an hour, maybe like 10 minutes. And it ended up being 6 days. And I feel like, of course, that was really hard losing a child, but I feel like I gave it everything I had. I got to meet her. My son got to meet her. Our family got to meet her. I got to hold her and smell her and be with her. And in 2019, at the end of the year, I was like, I think that this could be a really good story. And the reason I say that is because I felt like when life threw me a challenge, like something I never wished for, and I didn't just like get under the covers and hide. I came out and I was like, you know what? I'm still going to live my life. I'm still going to take care of my son. I'm going to be super honest and vulnerable about like, this is hard and this really sucks, but I'm just going to try my best to make the best of it. And I thought that could be a good story. And then like 4 months into writing, the pandemic hit. And so after about a year of writing, this book title just kind of came to me, When Wishes Change. And my editor, who's like phenomenally talented in writing and editing, was like, your story isn't just like a mom that lost a child. It's about how when life hits us with a change, which is going to happen to everybody, and it's definitely happened to all of us in the last 2 years, how do we train ourselves to like prepare for that and to face a situation with as much optimism as we can, but also be really honest and vulnerable about how like this really sucks, but I'm going to still wake up every morning and try my best. And what I saw was that when I started public speaking, high school and college age audiences respond to this like, well, with a lot of tears, but really well. And so you would think, well, they're not pregnant, they haven't had a child, they don't understand what that's like, but they do understand right now, especially what it's like for a wish not to come true and be like really stuck in this point where they're like, well, what do I do now? I was supposed to go to Stanford my whole life and I didn't get in. Like, I'm just not going to go to college, or I can't live anymore. And my message, and you can be upset, you can be angry, and you can feel all those feelings because you need to. Like, you don't have to fake that you're okay if you don't feel that way, but you need like an army of people to surround you, and you need to be honest about those feelings. Like if you need to seek therapy, or if you need to talk to somebody about it, and then you got to get out of bed and like dust off your shoes and say, I'm going to see what's next. I'm not going to let this distract my plans for my life. And so I've kind of just like created this messaging around when wishes change. And I think I was creating that message for years with my athletes, because I saw them just like knocked down so hard by disappointment, much more than I saw like a decade ago. And I saw this generation like really struggling when life changed, like really struggling. Their parents divorced, or, like a boyfriend breakup or a friend dispute. It seemed like it was just really extreme and hard for them to get through. And so I'm really passionate about like that messaging and, being able to talk to people about allowing your wishes to change.
Yeah. Go ahead, Susan.
No, go ahead, Megan. It's quite it's definitely the story of resilience, right? We figuring out how to dive into our resilience. It's difficult, it's painful. We have to go through those things almost as a way to become resilient. The pains of life. Nobody gets through life without experiencing some level of pain.
Yeah, it reminds me of Plan B, which was written by Salzberg, I think. But it's a story about
Sharon Salzberg?
Sharon Salzberg, yeah. Is that right? Yeah. She's not the meditation person.
That's the meditation person.
Yeah, that's not who it is. No, it's not that. She's a tech lady. She works in the tech industry, and she had a husband, and just like a whole plan for her life. And then he died suddenly. And I believe I could be butchering the whole thing, but she did write a book called Plan B. Don't trust me on a Friday afternoon with what comes out of my mouth. However, the idea is the same, which is like, we have these ideas in our mind about what life is going to be about and how it's going to work out. And then life does what it does, which is it throws a wrench into the situation. And then it's all about how you start to work with that and move through it. And that's a really important message. And just a helpful reminder for kids, because I think when we're young, we idealize things so much, and then we get older and we're like, oh.
Well, I'm also really interested. I have also seen over the last 15 years or so, more difficulty dealing with disappointment or the stress of life, right? Because life is stressful and there's more stress at the same time. So it's just been this strange balance of things have become more stressful. And I think many of the ways in which parenting shifted and culture shifted, and frankly, phones and technology, and I have this, I know Megan's heard me talk about this, but I really feel like when I was a kid and my mother would drag me around to the post office and Filene's basement, and then we had to go grocery shopping. We had to do all the errands.
Mhm.
And I would have to sit there and manage my own internal distress around, well, this is boring and this sucks. And I wish I was doing something more fun. But you learn how to tolerate small doses of distress in those moments. And since technology has been so readily accessible, when our children in the grocery store, in the post office, and the doctor's office now are experiencing that same level of distress, we hand them technology, and the technology relieves the distress. But in doing that, we're not actually teaching them how to build up a resilient. It's in the small doses, in the small moments, that we teach that internal resilience to then that helps us build up the strength, so that when there is a larger disappointment, we've had some practice at it, at things that weren't as high stakes. And but if you haven't had those opportunities to weather the distress of small disappointments, and every time something doesn't go well, somebody swoops in and rescues you, and we're doing our kids a disservice. And I think more and more of that is happening. So I have also seen that, and I look at my own. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old right now, and worked really hard to limit the technology. Sometimes avoided the seductive nature of, if I just give them my phone, I know they'll stop crying. I tried not to do that very often, and they're pretty great kids. But I think that there's this, what's happening culturally, and then how do we build up resilience? I think I really do feel strongly that we have a responsibility in education and parenting and community and culture to support healthy doses of stress. And I feel like we go one way or the other. It's like this extreme, you got to give up everything, do everything, be sports, wreck your body, keep going, or the falling apart, not being able to do anything. And we've lost this really beautiful in the middle place where most of us used to live.
Yeah. And it's hard because I feel like it's a double-edged sword. Like, for example, my son's in 5th grade and he does play select baseball, but we've always made it a thing. Like, this is your choice. You don't have to play, but he loves it. Like, and it gets his energy out, and like, he just loves baseball. So we're like, cool, as long as you like it. And this year is the first year he gets to play for his school. And so he's got all this pride surrounding the fact that he gets to play for his school. Well, the boys on the team that have played select, like kind of like year round, are 1,000 times better than the boys that played rec or never played. And now you've got this great divide where, to be honest, those kids will never get a shot to play in high school around here at the big high schools we have. And it's sad because, like, I know those boys would love to, but maybe they've chosen not to, or their parents didn't put them in it. But now they can't even throw a ball, and every sport has gotten so competitive. So I've even struggled as a parent to be like, is this too much for him? And so every season we're like, Cameron, do you love this? Do you want to do it? Do you understand it's a sacrifice financially for mommy and daddy? Do you understand we're going to have you do chores to, like, work? So it makes him kind of like show that he loves it in a way. But he still thinks it's the most fun game in the world. And, we spend a lot of time on the baseball fields, but it's outdoors and it keeps him off devices. And so I also can see that side where I'm like, he's not getting in trouble. He's making these relationships. I see him strike out and he wants to, like, implode, but then he has to learn how to calm himself down and get back on the field and pitch or play first base and be able to, like, get through, like, the adversity of striking out. And so I love, because I've coached, I'm like, I love that side of athletics. But then I'm also like, but I'd also like more time on the weekends to spend with my kids and to have fun. And so I just wish there was a better answer. I mean, I don't have it by any means, but I don't know.
You touched on another point there that I think is really important around equity, right? So if by the time you're in middle school, kids have had to already get to the point that they have had coaching and special, played on these really expensive club teams, and that there is such a big issue around equity. And even in school, public schools that don't have the same kind of money, and how that is also increasing the gap, because we also know sports is it for many of the young people that I work with in this community. Parents are sacrificing everything to get, because that is how they expect to get them to college and pay for college, because otherwise college would be too far away. So there's so much wrapped up in this. And I find it kind of sad, because we are again taking away some of the joy. And it sounds like your son's still having that joy, which is great. But as he progresses up, that gap continues to widen.
And that's the part we haven't, gotten into yet, because he is only 10, and like him and his guy friend, his little boy friends, like they're just like, this is amazing. We get to hang out every weekend together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even my little one, my 5-year-old, like she wants to do all of it. She wants to do dance, and she wants to do soccer, and really for her, it's like, I want to hang out with my friends and like have a good time and get snacks at the end, And so it is definitely a different mindset when they're little, like their motivation. But coaching high school, I definitely saw those that had such a love for the game, and it was so healthy for them, versus those that are like, I am so sick of this, and my mom is forcing me to play. Mm-hmm. And I hated that, because I saw the, love of the game being robbed away because they were being forced to play. And I was like, I'm not making you play. Like, go do something else. Like, go do fine arts, go do academics, like do something else. Like, there's so many options in high school to do. And they're like, no, my mom said I have to. And I'm like, well, that's when the fun usually gets robbed. Like when the kid's admitting that they have no love for it anymore, and that they're just being forced by their parents. But like you said, like some see it as their ticket to college, and getting themselves to a place where they can send their kid to a college, because financially they can get an athletic scholarship if their child is really talented. So, I mean, it's just, nobody has the answer, but I think it's definitely it's a slippery slope sometimes.
Yeah, that's really complicated. And yeah, I mean, sports are a great stabilizer for a lot of kids, an entry point for all sorts of activities. And also there are some of the inequities in how our system is set up. I'm wondering in our last couple of minutes here, if you could give us any sense of like, what is it you talk with? You said you're a speaker now around your book. What's your main message that you'd like for people who are listening here to get from your book and from what you're putting out into the world?
Well, to me, it's about making sure that our children know that they're loved, and their identity is in way more than their extracurricular activities. And you could say that for academics too. You could have a kid that's like super academic, and they feel like if they don't make A's, their mom won't love them, because It's such a high pressure. You could say it about the kid who their parent wants them to be famous in film, and they've thrown them in every acting class. And if they screw up their lines, like that's their identity. And I think we just have to be better about telling our kids, like, your identity, like, I will love you no matter what. If you want to quit baseball, if you want to stop doing this, or if you accidentally make a B, their identity is in more than that. And then also, I think that we need to challenge our kids to like wish and dream big and like set goals. I'm really big on goal setting when I coach. I'm like, well, what's your purpose in being here? Like, what's your goal for the season? What's your goal for this week? So that they can like really strive for something. But when their wishes change, and when they get injured, or when they don't get into their dream school, and that the big wish that they had doesn't come true, I think that's where we need to do a better job of teaching our kids like how to respond to that. Mm-hmm. Part of it is saying it's okay not to be okay. Like, you don't have to fake that your life is perfect all the time on social media. Because I think that's where some of it comes from, is like, I'm a wreck on the inside, but I'm too afraid for anybody to know that. So, I mean, my message of, I think, when wishes change is pretty universal for a lot of us, adults and kids. But I think we just need to do a better job of allowing our wishes and dreams to adjust over time. Even though we need to still have them, we need to be able to just pivot a little bit better.
That's great. Well, thank you, Tricia, for being with us. It's been such an honor to have you. And the message is a really important one, to have dreams, but also be open to, what you're telling. What I heard was open to how your life can change along the way. It can actually be much more rich and much more rewarding than the goal you're even setting out for in the first place. So that's an important message for all of us. It's been such a pleasure to have you. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you.
And yeah, how can people find you? That would be the last thing I would ask. So do you have a website or anywhere we can direct people to learn more about you?
Yep, you can go to whenwisheschange.com or social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at whenwisheschange.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tricia.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Hey everyone, this is Megan from The Awakening Educator. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Tricia Roos about sports and finding different pathways. When one door closes, there's always another window that's opening somewhere. Speaking of open windows and opportunities, I wanted to make sure you both knew about Susan's and my offerings that we have on our individual websites. So Susan's been diving deep into the neurosequential model, as well as exploring the role of being in nature and how being in nature can really be transformative and healing for us. If you want to learn more about Susan's work, please go to her website, which is hopereimagined.com, hopereimagined.com, hopereimagined.com. I continue to talk and do work around strategic planning, mindfulness, self-awareness, and the necessary work that educators need to do with themselves while they also work in their educational settings. You can learn more about my work at your3eyes.com. That's YOUR, the number 3, EYES.com. As always, if you like this show and appreciated what we're doing, please rate our show. It does a lot for us on the ratings. And also please share it with others. Thank you so much.
Class is dismissed. Wasn't that fun? Susan and Megan are always happy to greet you on the next episode of The Awakening Educator. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Education is the foundation for a brighter future. Open your eyes to The Awakening Educator.